Hi, Jim here, and you're listening to the Honest Filmmaker podcast, career advice from people in the business. This week, I'm speaking to Academy Award winning supervising sound editor Nina Hartstone. Nina's been working in the business for over 30 years. She's worked her way up from assistant sound editor on roles in the 90s, right through to winning an Oscar for her work on Bohemian Rhapsody. Recent projects include Saltburn, Enola Holmes 1 and 2, and I Want to Dance with Somebody, the Whitney Houston story. I spoke to Nina about how she got into the industry. She gave me some tips for you to do the same and get your career started in sound. We also talked about what makes good sound design, and she told me what it was like to win an Oscar. Enjoy. I'll start where I start with most people, which is, could you talk me through how you got into the industry in the first place?
Yes. So I've been in the industry a very long time, since last century, in fact. Basically, my father works in the industry, or works in the industry. He still does some teaching. He worked at Palmer Studios as a re-recording mixer. So I was introduced to film from a young age, but I always wanted to be in the art department. So when I did work experience at school age, I actually joined the art department on Batman and fell in love with doing all of that. So my degree at University of Kent, Canterbury, was in visual and performed arts, which was basically film studies and art history. And I used my holidays to work on set and get involved with filmmaking as much as possible. But when I had finally graduated, again, because it was a long time ago, there was no practical aspect to my degree. It was all sort of film theory, watching films, talking about films, which was great, but qualified me for precisely nothing. So I ended up needing to get a job, and I got an introduction with a supervising sound editor who was doing low budget films at Palmer Studios, like Cyborg Cop and Woman of Desire. And back then it was all on 35mm and mag, and so I sort of begged to be able to just come along and make the tea and watch what they were doing. And that's how I started off. I just sort of learnt the post-production process, film by film, and then I rode the wave of digital audio workstations coming in. And not because I had any computer knowledge at all. It's just that I was one of the young people on the block. And so people thought I might know how to work them. So I sat there and used my lunch hours and evenings with the manual, pressing buttons to figure out what they did, make myself useful.
So you mentioned it. I was going to mention it later on, but I'm going to mention Cyborg Cop because I think it's awesome. When I looked at your IMDb and I did a bit of stalking, I was like, I've got Academy Award winner who started off in a film called Cyborg Cop. So can you tell me about the Cyborg Cop shoot, please? What is the film? I've not seen it.
It is. It's a long time ago, so I'm casting my memories back. I think it's sort of like RoboCop, but a bit of a cheaper version of it.
Nice.
I worked on that, and I worked on another one called Project Shadow Chaser that was a little bit like sort of androids do Die Hard.
Oh, lovely! These sound right up my street.
It was so fun, and that Project Shadow Chaser I was on the shoot for. And then Cyborg Cop I was in post. So to be honest with you, I can't remember the plot terribly well, but it was it was those sort of actiony films, and we were just trying to make it all as exciting and get as many good sounds in there as possible.
Love it. I'm going to definitely watch those two movies. So then, could you tell me? So you're now supervising sound editor.
Yes.
In practical terms, what does that role encompass?
It basically means I am a sound editor, and I am on the film overseeing the sound editorial team in post-production. So because sound it can be a little bit disjointed sound, because you have your production sound mixer on set, and then they finish as the shoot finishes, and then quite often you don't actually have anyone on sound for a few weeks until you get an edit of the film. And that's the point normally where I would come on and bring a team on, and we'd start working on the editorial side of the sound, and then I would see it through alongside the re-recording mixers when we finally mix it. So it's really sort of overseeing the sound, the creation of sound for the film, and working on with the sound that was recorded on set.
Right, gotcha. And so obviously you've been around in the industry for a long time. How has it changed over the years, do you think?
I mean, it's changed, certainly for me in sound, it's changed hugely. When I started off, I was definitely the only woman on the block. So that side of it, it's improving somewhat. There's still a long way to go in terms of getting better representation in sound, not just gender, but across all aspects. So that sort of side of things is changing, and definitely, for me, like I said, my rise through sort of going from actually working on film, being such a sort of tactile and as an assistant, that job was involved a lot of kind of physical input, rewinding film and carrying cans up to projection and all those sorts of things. Whereas these days, everything is very desk based for a lot of it, and except for those fun recording days. So the thing is, the technology obviously is constantly moving on, but the great thing is we're always just trying to decide how we want something to sound, and then seeing how the technology can help us do that, rather than make the technology lead. Just because it can do something doesn't mean to say it should.
Yeah, and I would say, as I've got older, the move to desk-based stuff's actually quite nice.
Yeah,
I think to lift things, boxes and stuff, I'm quite happy with the desk-based coffee style
exactly. Well,
creating.
it also means you appreciate those days much more when you do get to do something physical. So when we go and have our big crowd recording sessions, or go out and record sound effects and things, it's kind of fun. It's like something a bit different.
Yeah, definitely. So then, if you were to give somebody some advice now, so say they're leaving university, they want to work in post sound, what would you advise them to do?
I would say get involved with as many people as possible who are making films. There are so many young people making movies out there, whether it's short films or whatever. I mean, it's a small industry really over here, and I think it's great to sort of put yourself out there and start learning about, getting yourself connections with people who are making films, because you never know where those connections are going to lead. And that's still how I work now. So much of my work comes through having a chance meeting with someone, and then the next, that just ends up turning into something, kind of cool and fun. So definitely try and get together with other filmmakers, and also just watch films and listen to the sound on them, and just think about how the sound is telling the story. The more you sort of start unpicking the way our films are put together, the more knowledge you then have when you do get to go into the industry. I mean, it's hard. It's definitely hard to get started these days, but there are a lot of schemes out there as well. I would definitely say look through all the sort of websites, all the film-based websites, things like the guilds and Screen Skills and all those other places, and just see what opportunities there are. Very often, still a lot of the people who come into the industry might start as a runner, or that kind of thing, just because that's how you meet people.
Yeah, absolutely. And thinking about those, say the student movies or the first features, what? And I know this is a big question because you've obviously been doing it a long while, but what makes good sound design? What's your sort of top tip for that?
I mean, it really depends on the kind of film that you're doing. I think one of the first things we always think about is how what is the language of our film, what is the sound language of our film, and how best to enable that. And so, a film could be a big sci-fi, big action thing where sound is playing a very important role in the tension and the excitement of what you're watching, or it could be a very delicate drama where literally the tiniest breath and lip smack is telling you about your character. Everything we're trying to do with sound, because we do record so much of it in post-production and create an awful lot of the world that you are watching in post. So much of what we do, we're always trying to make sure that we're sort of gluing the sound onto the picture, that we're actually just trying to draw the viewer in to feeling like they're in that world. Which is, it could be from the performance of the character, it could be actually the physicality of the character with their Foley, or it could be the actual, the soundscape of the what you are seeing on screen. And so I think that the thing that makes good sound is really the thing that is telling the story the most, but also bringing the viewer into that world and suspending the disbelief of the fact that this thing is all, created and an artifice, actually.
Yeah. And even on those early projects, it can really save your bacon sound. It really can like fill gaps in the story that you've not considered when you shot it, and expand the story massively beyond what you imagined when you first shot it.
100%. And sound is also so important for sort of pulling you through the narrative of a movie, because sound can really affect how a scene plays, how an edit of a scene plays, whether it feels slow or fast. And also the transitions from one scene to another are
Mm.
very often dealt with sound, you know, whether you have a pre-lap or a post-lap, or whether you go hard from one scene to another, or whether you gently sort of fade across into the next scene. So I think those kind of things can really influence the pacing of how a movie feels when you watch it.
Yeah. And I noticed on your IMDb that you've done a lot of sort of ADR recording, that kind of stuff. Do
Mm.
you watch films now and instantly know when something's been recorded later or when it's been glued together? Are you able to sense that?
Yes, and I'm a nightmare to watch films with, because I think I've always, it's very difficult to actually put that head aside and just watch a film. Um, I mean, the reality is so much of what we do with sound is we're just trying to make it all feel real and let the
Mm.
viewer absorb into that world and feel like they're getting to know those characters. And I think the thing is, as humans, we're so expert at something being real and something being fake. We can so tell really quickly if something is not coming out of someone's mouth at the right pace or the right kind of performance for what their physicality is doing. And so it's a difficult thing to do, to get that right when you do re-record performances in post. But it's one of the things that obviously I'm hyper kind of aware of whenever I'm watching movies, and it's the sort of thing that bumps me out quite
Yeah,
quickly.
I can imagine. And do you have you got any tips for that? And are you often, I'm assuming when you do those sessions, you've got the director in directing.
Mhm.
Have you got any tips for sort of dealing with actors and performers?
I think the main thing I would say about dealing with actors' performance and re-recording their performances in ADR is allowing the actor the space and time to get back into the character. You know, very often they come to it and they haven't been on the film for a while. It's quite a sterile environment. Quite often an ADR theatre, you know, your voice in the theatre sounds louder than it does out in the real world. And you don't have your costume, you don't have your co-stars, you don't have your props. The whole thing does feel quite different. And so every actor has a different process, and allowing your actor and discussing with them how, you know, what would work best for them. So the things that we do is we'll let them move around as much as possible. If they're in a scene and they're lying down, we say lie down in the theatre if you're happy to do that. You can perform it from exactly the same position. If you're walking around the room, we'll boom you and you can walk and deliver your lines, because that's what you were doing on screen. And it's just allowing the actor to try and give the best performance, because the reality is, however good you know, however clean and good and everything that your mics are, and however much you match it from a technical side, if you haven't got the performance, it's never going to sit in. And so that really is the thing that comes first. So working alongside the director and the actor to get them comfortable and put them in a space where they feel like they can give a good performance again, is definitely the key for ADR.
Yeah, good tip. And then looking at so you got Academy Award for Bohemian Rhapsody, which has got a huge amount of scenes where sound and music kind of overlap and merge and kind of cross over. So
Mm.
how difficult was that? And I'm assuming you had a close relationship with music on that one.
Yeah, it was a great project to be involved with in that sense, because I mean, one of the things I do love about my job is that it's always changing, and every film I go on, I end up learning new things and developing new skills and actually going about things in a different way, because every project needs something different. And the great thing about Bohemian Rhapsody was that we had a very cohesive sound and music team, so we were all constantly working together. There wasn't the same sort of division you quite often see between sound and music. And for me, a personal challenge on there was then starting to work with vocals. So sort of treating the vocals as if they're like sung dialogue in a way,
Mm.
to try and make it really feel real. So often in musical films, it feels like when the music starts, it almost feels like the whole world drops away and someone's turned the music on. You know, I'll
Mm.
show my age by saying put the record on, or
Yeah.
put a CD on. But whereas we're always trying to make it feel like an organic synthesis from dialogue scenes into the musical scenes, you know, and
Yeah.
so everything all felt very much gelled together and one continuous performance.
And did you get sick of the Queen songs or no?
Do you know? No, do you know what? It's so funny. You think you might, right? Because we've listened to them so many times,
Mm.
but there's just such great music to listen to. That's the thing. I think there's amazing musical complexity in there, and obviously just the stunning playing of the instruments and Freddie's incredible voice. You just the energy that you get from Queen music is incredible, and I loved every minute of listening to it and continue to listen to it. If it comes on the
really?
radio, it goes straight up. The volume goes straight up in the car, so I can sing along. It's great. I love it.
Oh, brilliant, brilliant. And then, so you've had this awesome experience on this movie, and then you've gone and won an award for it, Academy Award.
Mhm.
What was that like? How does that even work? Do you get any sense of whether your team's going to win it, or is it just so random you had no idea?
You have no idea, and it just it feels so fortunate, particularly on that film where we had a fantastic team. You know, we really all got on really well. We were all pulling in the same direction. We were all trying to make the film as great as it could possibly be for sound and music. And I think so. The whole experience was really fun. I mean, what's not fun about coming into work and listening to Live Aid? You know, for so many days of your life as well. So it was a wonderful experience working on it, and then for it to start receiving some awards recognition was really just the icing on the cake. You can't actually believe that this is the journey you're going on. And I think lots of people really loved that film when it came out. It did incredibly well in the box office, and it just seemed to be sort of riding a bit of a wave. So it's you don't actually know if you're going to win or anything, but it was one of those things where you get a nomination and then the next one to come and you're just like, oh my goodness, this is just. And then for me, obviously, as a woman in this scenario, I was trying to work out what I was going to wear. I mean, I'm used to being behind the camera,
It's a lot of
not really
pressure, isn't it?
being looked at. Yeah, and it was
Yeah.
definitely a hard, not hard, but it was an interesting then dimension came into my life of having to actually talk about film and talk to press and do all those kind of things, which is something that I hadn't had to do really up until that point.
Mm. And have you got any memories from that night? Did you meet any mega stars? Is there anyone who sticks out?
We had just such a fun time because Queen opened the Oscars, so they with Adam Lambert actually were the opening act, and having the band there was just incredible as we were going through, and it was a super fun night, just that we carried on until about 6 a.m.
Lovely.
With a little interlude of me at the Vanity Fair party talking to BBC Radio Berkshire just to bring me back down to
Oh,
earth.
nice. Love it. I love it. The other one that stuck out as a recent film that's kind of went massive when it came out was Saltburn.
Mm.
So talk to me about that project. Is this a very, I love it as a film. I think it's really cool. And it's a very strange film. So what was your
Mm.
experience like working on that?
Oh, I mean, incredible. Just honestly, again, loved every minute of that film. Emerald is such a fantastic filmmaker, and so brilliantly collaborative as well. She's, so good with her actors. And such incredible performances in that film all the way along, and the sort of the needle drops and the musical aspect to it too were just made it a very high energy, very fun, very collaborative process. Obviously, some scenes in there that could be quite shocking for people to watch them the first time round, and I do remember early on sort of watching the whole thing and going, okay, but it's right up my street, really. I love all that kind of stuff. When I was doing my university degree, I studied David Cronenberg and David Lynch, and I do love a film that is saying something new, and that
Mm.
is actually just it's so engaging to watch, and you don't know where it's going to go next. And it was just so brilliantly created and put together by Emerald, and we had such a great time, the whole team just all working together on it, that just a brilliant brilliant, very, very fortunate and great job to have been a part of.
I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. If you want more advice from industry professionals who are out there at the moment working, or you just want to listen to some cool stories from film sets from around the world, then please do subscribe.